Okay, guys, this is from Serge Del Mar's Substack, dated February 28th, 2025. Scientology Word Games: How They Rewrote the Law to Hide Child Abuse, by Serge Del Mar. Notice all the kids. I can't make the picture bigger. All the children with the grown adult. Isn't that wonderful? In 1997, when the Child Protection Act was updated, maybe FBI needs to look at that one too, to require clergy as mandated reporters, Scientology had a problem. Up until that point, they had operated under their own internal justice system. Where have we seen that before? Let me see. Catholic Church, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Kingdom of God, the Children of God. That's a real good one. Nexium. What other places? A world where crimes against children were never to be reported to law enforcement, as ordered in policies of convicted felon L. Ron Hubbard. Apparently, some cops don't think that's like a big deal either, because they're doing it too. Wild. But now, with new legal language explicitly stating that clergy members were required to report child abuse, they needed a way to avoid accountability while still appearing compliant with the law. Enter Claire Headley, a former high-ranking executive of the Religious Technology Center, RTC, the highest governing body of Scientology. Whom else was in the RTC? Because isn't that where a lot of the covering up of child SA and other abuses occurred? According to her sworn testimony, the organization didn't just ignore the law, they actively worked to rewrite their internal policies to obscure it. Instead of complying with the law, they removed the specific legal language referring to mandated reporting and replaced it with euphemisms, vague sanitized phrases designed to confuse, mislead, and protect the abusers rather than the kid victims. Actually, Jesse Prince goes in deep regarding how Rinder, Rathburn, and some of the other executives worked very closely with the police, which would answer my question. My question always was, why isn't Rinder out there with the protesters? Mike Rinder, in charge of OSA and legal in 1997, spent his time in Scientology hiring the best of the best attorneys to advise him in OSA. When he left, he went out there pretending he was whistleblowing. And meanwhile, where was his claim of ignorance about how the law worked in terms of mandated reporters? Well, that and a whole lot of other things. It's my questions. Free to have questions, isn't it? I remember reading somewhere, and I've got it in my channel, that there were whispers and people that were stating that Rathburn was involved in. This is simply what I read. I'm only repeating what I read, that he was involved in Merck and the cover-up of Merck. Okay, Mike Rinder, he left Scientology, had 2 kids, and as a parent, never brought up the fact that there were no mandated reporters inside the Scientology hotels. Do you guys remember when one of the elderly people who escaped Scientology was talking about one of the senior executives? I don't want to get this wrong. I believe it may have been Ron Miscavige Sr. or Jr. I don't remember which one. I think it was Jr. Was trying to get her to massage him. And this person said Mike Rinder was living in the same quarters as he was. And he looked at Miscavige and said, "What?" He said his name, and then he said, "What the hell are you doing?" Huh. It's giving guilty AF conscious. It's giving willful ignorance of the law, because admitting what he done exposed to the very real legal liability for violating mandated reporter law. Not that anyone holds him accountable either. That's the biggest problem there. Where Rinder knew he would not be able to pretend any of the loopholes about being a religion applied to the fact that they knew the whole time kids would be AR'd at the Scientology hotels. And not only was the felony not reported, didn't little Debbie over there, she knew all about it. In fact, it was Debbie Cook that used to bring it all up in their meetings every week. You know, the children who they went out 2D with. Applied to the fact that they knew the whole time kids would be AR'd at the Scientology hotels. And not only was the felony not reported after they found out time, place, form, and event of the felony, the fact that the R was then blamed on the kid. Yeah, didn't a lot of those executives covering up get promoted as well? Let's be absolutely clear. No organization, religious or otherwise, has a legal right to redefine child protection laws to suit their interests. The law is the law, and mandated reporting is not optional. Now, let's look at the photographic evidence images that show exactly what was happening while Scientology was busy rewriting policy to shield predators. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Look at all those children with the adults. You know, the children that the parents just sign over to a lot of guardian P-files as well. Minions forced to spend hours in a sauna alongside unrelated random adults under the guise of purification. Funny how all these older men that were in Scientology never talk about this, huh? You guys know, I'm not going to go into it, but I like to bring it up. Having children in saunas has nothing to do with minority religion. Period. A process that involved stripping down to minimal clothing, taking increasing doses of niacin and other supplements with no medical oversight, and sweating alongside adults, many of whom were complete random strangers. Don't you guys wonder how many of those were child predator pedophiles? But as long as your stats are up, you can AR children. These were not controlled, regulated environments with trained professionals. These were high-risk, unsupervised situations where abuse was not just possible, but inevitable. It's still happening now. It's still happening now. FBI doesn't do anything about it. Department of Justice doesn't do anything about it. Child Protective Services doesn't do anything about it. The parents, the Scientology parents, don't do anything about it, unless they're the perpetrators. But, you know, it's all related. Guardians don't do anything about it. Child staff members don't do anything about it. Perpetrators everywhere. These were not control-regulated environments. I already read that. Abuse was not just possible, but inevitable. And when it happened, when kids were harmed, of course it was going to happen. There was no one to report it to, the authorities, because, as Headley testified, they were too busy violating the law and covering the crimes by reframing the abuse with their made-up list of euphemisms. Hold on. There's another picture. There's good old Debbie, coaching a child to lie about S abuse, and nothing happens. More kids. Excuse me. Why? Because they made sure that no one in Scientology was acting in any capacity of being a mandated reporter. Because every teacher, every ethics officer, every purification rundown in charge, every senior Scientology executive, even those overseeing programs with direct, unfettered access to kids, were following internal made-up policies that had intentionally erased the legal obligations to report any of the crimes against children that today they want to pretend what didn't happen. And who approved those policies? The highest levels of Scientology leadership. The same leadership that claims to be above the law. Just can't help but think of those non-disclosure agreements that Rinder wanted all the aftermath clients to sign. The same leadership that claims to be above the law. The same leadership that profits from the labor of children, exploits their vulnerability, and systematically removes every single safety net that was legally bound to protect them. Yeah, I want to add in there, the parents should have protected them. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not an accident. This is a deliberate criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice, shielding predators, and systemically covering up all crimes the Scientology leadership found out in nauseating detail were committed against kids. Yeah, they're in the PC folders. Going on right now at Fort Harrison, and all these other orgs. It's going on everywhere. Mace Kingsley Family Center. Isn't that wonderful? Scientology knew the law. They had and still have some of the most expensive, high-powered lawyers on their payroll. Lawyers who are themselves mandated reporters under California law. Not that that makes anyone do anything anymore. I don't think it ever did, really. It's my opinion. I mean, think about all the doctors that report these S abuse and what happens. Lawyers who are themselves mandated reporters under California law. Wonder what Moxie knows about that. Lawyers who got called when kids got AR'd and therefore knew exactly what was required by the law and mandated rules, but instead chose to let the abuse continue, unreported, and the self-admitted predators fully legally shielded, including but not limited to, for profit via hefty tax, write-offs offered to them by the literal Internal Revenue Service. In 1993, when Scientology struck a deal with the IRS to regain its tax-exempt status, but that agreement came with a condition. If criminal activity was found within the organization, their exemption would be revoked. I also want to add too, and I'm going to look something up after I go through this article. Isn't it a federal crime to threaten federal workers? I think it is. Yet, despite this legal obligation, Scientology had continued to operate with total impunity, ensuring that no criminal acts committed against children were ever reported. The photographic evidence of children forced into purification saunas alongside unrelated adults, the systematic removal of mandated reporting language from internal policies, all of it points to a deliberate strategy to shield the organization from legal consequences that are called for in the law. Scientology's leadership has always known the stakes, and they have afforded themselves the best attorneys that somehow all conveniently miss the memo to what their clients have been doing in regards to not following mandated reporting laws, as they acted like these laws did not even exist. I don't know, I can't help but think of how many LAPD officers that don't seem to know the law. Not just LAPD, but a lot of the LAPD. I really want to go deep into that, but that's too much energy. These Scientology executives have always known that once law enforcement, including the ones, the safe appointed ones, including but not limited to the corrupt LAPD and CWPD, ever gained access to the full extent of mandated reporter laws that was happening, their precious tax-exempt status and their so-called legal protections would vanish overnight. So instead of stopping the crimes against the kids, they decided to bury them. So instead of stopping the crimes against the kids, they decided to monetize on them and incentivize self-admitted felons with ways to float a needle, all the while profiteering by way of offering them tax break incentives and benefits. Yeah, all on the so-called government's watch. You know, like, where do you guys think all this stuff's created? Instead of complying with mandated reporting laws, they rewrote their own policies to erase the very concept. But here is the good news. The law is clear AF. Tax-exempt status does not grant immunity from criminal prosecution, unless you're Scientology, right? And mandated reporting is not optional. They cannot claim ignorance. They cannot claim oversight. They strategically remove the language of the law from their policies to continue protecting predators while keeping their tax-exempt status intact. This is what we are fighting against. This is why we are speaking up. And this is why Scientology must be held fully, legally, criminally accountable. No more kids in Scientology, because no kid is safe at the Scientology hotels, where they have made damn sure that mandated reporters do not exist. Reminds me a lot of these schools as well. The law is clear, and the consequences for violating it are quite severe. And there we go. I will leave a link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.